Now I'd like to introduce, well, I won't introduce him just yet. We'll do the question. So if everyone's got their keypad in front of them, ready to go, you know the drill. We've got 15 seconds. How would you rate Scott Holmes' presentation? A, B, C, D, or E? Great. Remember to keep the texts, Twitters coming in. You've got those down. So I'd now like to introduce Steve Carroll. Steve Carroll's going to run a quick session on how people search online. Steve Carroll's been in the media industry over 20 years. He's been 5 years with realestate.com.au. Prior to that, he was with the Cura Mail, and before that, he was in other parts of the world. So Steve's going to share something with you I think you'll enjoy. Again, you'll get some real takeaways, some things that you probably know you should be doing and don't need and aren't doing, or things that you never thought about. So with that, I'll hand over to Steve.
Cheers, Ben. Fantastic. Wow, good morning, Brisbane, and what an awesome looking audience. Now, we've only got 25 minutes together, so we need to get to know each other really, really quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with a social experiment. Now, don't worry, nobody's going to get hurt, but what I do need you to do for me is I do need you all upstanding, okay? All on your feet. Absolutely. Now, I know about the creaky knees. I know about the big breakfast that you've just had, but just come with me because it will be lots of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions about some of the first things you do in the morning. Okay. So if one of the first things you do in the morning is you roll over in bed, you reach out for your partner, you look him or her in the eyes, you ignore the morning breath, and you say, "My darling, every morning I love you a little bit more. Let's make love." If that's one of the first things you do in the morning, you can take a seat. We've got a gentleman and a lady in the middle. A big round of applause, please. Oh, the lady stood up. The gentleman's fantastic. What's your name? Stan, Stan or Dan? Stan. Fantastic, well done. So if one of the first things you do in the morning is you roll out of bed, you get into a press-up position, you do 20 press-ups, you roll over, you do 20 sit-ups, you put your running shoes on, you go for a run. If that's one of the first things you do in the morning, you can take a seat. Okay, we've got 3, 4, probably a dozen. Fantastic. Still quite a few people standing though. So let's try this. If one of the first things you do in the morning is you reach out for a device like a mobile phone or an iPad to check your Facebook, to check your messages, to check your emails, to see what's happening in the world of sport and news, if that's one of the first things you do, you can take a seat. Wow. Unbelievable. About 3/4 of the audience. Now, for the ladies and gents who are still standing, look, as I said earlier, we've only got 25 minutes. We haven't got time to get into the nitty-gritty as to what you guys get up to, so you also can take a seat. So, what's that got to do with real estate? Well, look, I just wanted to make the point that this digital revolution is just changing everything we do, at work, at rest, and at play. And do you know what? Australia as a country is embracing this change faster than any other nation on the planet. 92% of Australian homes have access to the internet. In the UK, where I come from, is under 90%. Australia's penetration of mobile phone ownership is the highest on the planet. And Australians spend more time on social media than anywhere else in the world. Australians love technology. And what we're going to do in the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm hopefully going to give you some useful tips and ideas that you can take away to make the most of this trend that I'm talking about. Is that a good way to spend our time together? Yeah. Fantastic. So to make sure we're all on the same page, I want to ask you this question. how much has the digital revolution changed the real estate industry? So just 5 seconds, just have a little think about it. How much has it changed? No impact, moderate impact, or game changer? Okay, so I want to show of hands. No impact, hands up. Now that's pretty good because I actually did this presentation in WA a couple of weeks ago and half the audience raised their hand. It was a pretty tough 25 minutes, I can tell you. What about moderate impact? Show of hands. What about game changer? Okay, fantastic. Virtually everybody in the room. And I want to bring that point to life. So I think we've got Karuna from Cronus in Kelvin Grove in the audience. I've got, hello, how you doing? Fantastic. You don't need, you got the microphone? Brilliant. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to come down here. So we met about, an hour ago? Yeah? And you're a bit nervous about this. And all I'm going to do is ask you a couple of questions. So the first question is, how many listings has your office in Kelvin Grove got on realestate.com.au at the moment?
Last 15 days?
Last 15 days.
Yeah.
No. Currently today. So if you looked on the site now, how many listings have you got?
Just in Kelvin Grove?
Just in Kelvin Grove.
40?
40. Okay. So I had a look this morning. It wasn't quite 40, but we're not a million miles away. Okay. So that's the easy question, and you got it wrong.
Sorry. Well, the one you asked me before was 15 days, which was 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the really hard question. So those listings that you've got on the site, over the last 15 days, how many times have those listings been looked at only through a device like an iPad or a phone, right? So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to have a think about the question. And just for the benefit of the audience, in newspaper world, and I worked for newspapers for many years in the UK, worked for the Courier Mail as well, the jargon that we use is readership and circulation. In the digital space, we talk about engagement. So I just want to explain what an engagement is. So if I was looking at some of Karuna's properties through an iPad, and that's a nice kitchen. Oh, I wonder what the bedroom looks like. Oh, nice bedroom. What about the bedroom for the kids? Yeah, that's an engagement. And so if I go, look, I really like that property that Coronas have got on the market. When's the open for inspection? Okay, that's an engagement. So the question I'm asking Karuna is her listings that she's got on our site at the moment are obviously looked at through a big screen desktop, are obviously looked at through a phone and an iPad. My question is only in relation to the iPad or the phone. So how many engagements over the last 15 days do you reckon those properties have had? What do you reckon?
50,000.
50,000, wow, that's a good number. What does everybody else think? 50,000? What do you reckon, sir? No idea. Anybody over here? What do you reckon? A couple of hundred? So the actual answer, thank you very much, Karuna. You can take a seat. I think a round of applause for Karuna, because I did put her on the spot a little bit. So the actual answer is 110,430 engagements just through a device just over the last 15 days. I just want us to ponder on that number a second. Because if you do the maths, that's about 8,000 to 9,000 engagements every single day. So bearing that in mind, who here has got a process where on a weekly basis they check to see how good their listings and how good their branding looks on a mobile device? Who here's got a process already in place? A few people. Fantastic. In light of this, who here thinks having a process every single week to see how good they look on a mobile device would be a good idea? Okay, about half the room. That's really great. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, look, I just haven't got time for that. And even if I did have time, when would I actually do it? So let me show you this slide. So on the left-hand side, this is when people are looking at your listings through a mobile device. So as you can see, Monday to Friday, it's pretty consistent. That's a phone or an iPad. But look what happens on Friday night. Shoots up, a massive peak on Saturday. So if Karuna was going to give 15 minutes of her time to have a look to see how good she looks, how good her brand looks, how good her listings look, when would she do it? I should do it on a Friday lunchtime, absolutely. And on the right-hand side, this is through a big screen, a desktop computer, and as you can see, very consistent Monday to Friday, and then just dives off over the weekend. There are two reasons for this trend. Firstly, people like surfing the web on their boss's time. And secondly, at the weekend, we're all too busy running our kids round to football matches, cricket games, netball, and so on. And obviously, people are a lot more mobile. So I'd like you to write this down. Please write this down. Check mobile weekly. Okay, so let's move it on. Who's a big fan of James Bond in the audience? Yeah, most of us. Fantastic. Now, the guys who put their hand up, you know the fella downstairs, the professor type looking guy who makes all the gadgets for Bond? I think his name, is it Q? Yeah, Q. Okay. Well, we've actually got our own Q at realestate.com. His name's Dave Rule. And actually, ladies, I reckon there's a little bit of similarity between Bond, Rule, Bond, no, probably not, maybe not. But anyway, Dave works for us in Melbourne, and he's a bit of an oddball, I have to say. He's got the brain the size of a planet, and he's our Q. And his job is to find out ways that we can engage with our consumers to find out what they like about our site, what they don't like about our site, what they like about your listings, and what they don't like about your listings. That's his job. And I was in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, and Dave was very excited because he's just invented, this is true, a pair of glasses that he can actually put on a consumer in front of a laptop or in front of a desktop computer with realestate.com on the site. And the glasses actually record where the eyes go, and he can record where the eyes spend time looking and where the eyes move really quickly and move on from the page. And then obviously he can give that feedback and we can develop our product accordingly or our site accordingly. And so I said to Dave, hey, look, I'm doing this presentation in Brisbane. Can you find out what are the 3 most frustrating things that consumers, when I talk about consumers, I'm talking about people who come to our site, buyers, sellers, your customers. What are the 3 biggest frustrations? And I call them the top 3 listing sins, yeah? So what we're going to do is we're going to pump up the music in about 5 seconds. And I'm going to give you about a minute to see if you can work out what those 3 listing sins are. So work with your partner. Music for 1 minute, please, guys at the back. Let's go. Okay, great. Great to hear us talking. So, 3 sins. I'm going to show them in a second, but let's see where we got to. So, what do you reckon, guys, on the left-hand side? What do you think? No address, I heard. That's a pretty good one, yeah? Anybody else? No address? Lots of nods of approval here. No price, no address. Fantastic. What about over here? Photos, absolutely. So you're obviously a pretty switched on, intelligent bunch. That's why you've given your time to come here today, and you've actually nailed it. So just have a look. Let's have a quick look. So top 3 listing sins according to Dave Rule. 91% are likely to ignore properties without a price. Now, clearly that does not include auctions. Clearly it doesn't include auctions. Next one, 86% are likely to ignore properties without an address. No surprises. 55% are put off a listing with poor photography. So this is the time for honesty. Give me a hand if you commit any of these sins. Okay, fabulous. Oh, there's a couple of people, but thank you for being honest. What about people in your office who are not here today? How many people know who commit these sins? A few more. Fantastic. So here's the tip. If there's somebody who should be here today who's not here, don't tell them about this because then you've got the advantage. So look, it strikes me that what I've just shown you there is probably not rocket science, and you probably know that's probably more of a refresher. So what I do want to do is I want to share with you a stat that may surprise you. So we asked our audience, our consumers, what's the hardest part of selling a property? What do you reckon they said, gentlemen? Agent's response, picking an agent? Absolutely. 67% said deciding which agent to use. So let's just put that into context. We asked thousands and thousands of sellers, what's the hardest thing? And 67% of them said deciding which agent to use. Now we know there are a number of ways a seller might find an agent. They may have been recommended an agent by a friend. They may have seen an ad on a bus shelter or in the paper. Or they may have actually had a dealing with an agent in the past. You know, maybe they've sold a property for mum and dad or a friend, or they rented a property. And we understand all that. We all know that. But one of the trends that I want to share with you that we're noticing is sellers are telling us that they're starting to use our site when they're in the process of deciding on which agent to use. So let me just explain that. Let me just bring that to life. So a seller might be in Indooroopilly. They're not sure which agent to use. This is what we're noticing. They're going onto our site, they're keying in Indooroopilly. And then they're doing a mental digital interview of the agents that are listing in Indooroopilly. And they're asking themselves the question, who looks as though they know what they're doing? Who looks as though they are good enough to sell my property? That's the question they're asking when they're doing the search. So let's bring this to life, and I just want you all to put yourself into the shoes of a seller, right? So forget your real estate agents, put yourself into the shoes of a seller. And if you were looking to sell your property in Indooroopilly and you went onto the site and you were greeted with this type of advertising. So the ad on the left, really poor photography, no information about where the property is, no information about the price. And then there was an agent on the right-hand side, LJ Hooker, not sure if Kim Saunders is here. These are all live listings, right? Ticks all the boxes. Which agent are you likely to call to come and see you? Now, I think we know all the answer to that. Well, I think we know the answer to that. So let's just have a bit of a recap of what we've talked about so far. So we've talked about the fact that the digital revolution is changing everything we do. We've talked about the fact that lots and lots and lots of people are looking at your listings through a phone, through a mobile, right at this moment in time. We talked about the fact that photography and information is really important, and we've also talked about the fact that we're seeing a trend that people or sellers are using our site when deciding on which agent to use. And that's all happening today, that's all happening now. But what I want to do is I want to take you into the future. And I'm not talking about 10 years from now, I'm not talking about 5 years from now, not even talking about 3 years from now. But I want to talk about a trend that we're monitoring really closely at realestate.com. And it's called the social footprint. Now, I know, ladies and gentlemen, many of you in the audience will be now rolling your eyes and going, oh, here we go. The social media chestnut, that old one. Facebook. You know, it's the biggest waste of time of anything on this planet. And if you're thinking that, I actually agree. I mean, who here is sick of seeing photographs that their friends post of their newborn baby? 101 of them, and the kids look like aliens. And who here is sick of seeing photographs of what their friends are having for lunch? I mean, seriously, who cares if it's plain noodles or spicy noodles? We don't care. And who here is sick of seeing photographs from your friends who are in the 5 a.m. club? Photographs of the sunrise as they're jogging around Brisbane River and you're sitting in bed going, oh, bloody hell, my head, I wish I hadn't had that glass of wine last night. We're all on the same page. But who here thinks that social media is going to go away? No one. And all our data would suggest that social media is just going to get bigger and bigger. And what we're seeing is social media is going to become a bigger part of the real estate industry over the next 18 months. And this is being driven by two demographics, two groups of people. And Michael talked about the first group earlier on this morning. And it's this group of people who are probably just out of Gen Y, who have been brought up with technology and the internet. This group use social media all of the time. They are the most active in social media. Now, these guys may not be your customers right at this moment in time because they might be too young, but they soon will be. And this audience have a high expectation that the businesses that they're going to work with and they're going to deal with have a social footprint. If you want to woo this type of buyer and seller over the next couple of years, you have to develop a social footprint in your business, or you will miss out. The next demographic, which is driving this trend that we're spotting, was a bit of a surprise to me. Anybody want to take a guess what it might be? Sorry? Okay, I can't quite hear, but it's the demographic of 50 to 60. I'm just about knocking on the door. And when we talk to this consumer about their buying and selling habits, and we talk to hundreds of them all of the time, we are spotting a trend which would suggest that social media is going to become part of their mental digital interview that I talked about earlier when they're deciding on which agent to buy and sell. So what does a social footprint look like? So I found this Facebook page from Carroll Real Estate. Is there anybody from Carroll in the audience? Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely, we haven't met, so fantastic Facebook page. And I did actually ring the ladies to say, look, are you okay for me to share this because you're really early adopters and you're really switched on and savvy with this. And I just want to talk through my observation of their Facebook page. So they've got 4,000 likes. So let me ask the audience, 4,000 likes on their Facebook page. What does that tell you about Carroll Real Estate? Their engagement, thank you, sir. For me, it tells me that there's huge engagement and they're very popular in the community. They have a property of the week, which they obviously send out to 4,000 followers who have requested to have information sent to them. What does that tell you about Carroll Real Estate and their brand? See, for me, it tells you that they're really professional and good photography is really, really important. They also have, I was really impressed with this because I've just bought a property and we're renovating it at the moment. They have a library of photographs and it's like Homes and Garden magazine all online. And my wife was flicking through the photographs on this Facebook page going, God, what a great idea for our new kitchen, Steve. How fantastic is that? Oh, look at that colour scheme in the bedroom. So what does that tell you about Carroll? But for me, it tells me that they're an innovative bunch that are really creative. They also have a downloadable guide to selling, buying, investing. So what does that tell you about them? Well, for me, it tells me that they're the local real estate expert. And finally, if you read their news feed, I was expecting a load of stuff about all their listings and this, that, and the other, boring, boring, boring. But what I actually found out was their recommendation on the best places for coffee. Also, places to take the kids. Also, the fact the local butcher had a special offer on barbecue food for that weekend. So what does that tell you about Carroll Real Estate? It tells me that they're the local voice on what's going on in their area. Absolutely fantastic. They're already switched on to a trend that we're seeing is going to really hit real estate in the next 18 months. So in light of what I've just shared with you, who here thinks they probably just need to have a look at their social footprint? Okay, fantastic, about half the audience. Now, if you're not quite convinced, just have a look at this video, which goes for 90 seconds. Okay, fantastic. So I'm about done. So what have we talked about so far? Well, we've talked about the digital revolution is changing everything. We've also talked about looking your best on mobile is absolutely critical. Not doing that would be a bit like the speakers turning up today with coffee stains on their shirts and dirty shoes. You just wouldn't do it. We've talked about the fact that understanding consumer behaviour is really, really important, and it's changing all of the time, and your AM can keep you updated on a monthly basis on all the work that David Rule is doing back in Melbourne. And we've talked about social and the importance of a social footprint. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Steve Carroll. You can connect with me, LinkedIn, you can follow me on Twitter, or you can just grab me outside if you wish. Thank you for your time and thank you for turning up today.